Hello, welcome to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationships podcast. I'm Natalie Roberts and I'm here with my co-host, Heather Parks. We've both been in our neurodiverse relationships and families for more than 25 years. We met 10 years ago when we were feeling really desperate and trying to solve a lot of issues in our relationship and our families. We've been journeying since then. We've found many more positive and hopeful ways to solve, resolve, repair, reconnect in those relationships and in our families, in our lives. And we now co-host also Loving Difference online, giving hope and a way forward for neurodiverse relationships. In this podcast, though, we're busting the myths about neurodiverse relationships, which we had when we started this journey, that we've realised aren't true, and that actually were preventing us from recovering and having the relationships with our partners and children that we wanted. So we want to dispel these myths and bring you hope that absolutely things can change. So whether you're out and about or comfy with a cuppa, let's dive into our next conversation. See you there.
Welcome to the Myth-Busting Neurodiverse Relationship podcast. I'm Heather Parks and I've been in a neurodiverse relationship with my husband Phil for 25 years and we have 4 children. All of us have had struggles and challenges, particularly when neurodiversity was unknown. I discovered new ways of navigating difference so that I can be true to myself and thrive in my neurodiverse family. I'm now an accredited somatic coach and nervous system educator, helping others to heal so that they can be the best versions of themselves and thrive too.
Hello, I'm Natalie Roberts. I've been in a neurodiverse relationship and family with my husband Pete for 25 years. We have 3 children together. We discovered neurodiversity was a part of our story in 2014 when we were really struggling as a couple and family. Now we're thriving and enjoying life in ways I just couldn't have imagined back then. I'm also an accredited relationship coach supporting individuals and couples in neurodiverse relationships to reverse the impact of unknown neurodiversity and thrive in a relationship and a life that they dream of.
Since we met 9 years ago, we've both been working on reversing the impact of unknown neurodiversity and found new ways to resolve complex and everyday relationship and family challenges without our partners involved. We want you to know that you can change your whole experience by focusing on yourself and without needing to change anyone else. We also realise that this journey is about so much more than new or more knowledge.
So in 2020, we created Loving Difference, the kind of online community that we'd have loved to have found when we were new to it all and struggling. And together, we now also host an online programme with a map, empowering resources, tools, all the support you need to recover yourself, create sustainable change, and be you in your relationship and your life. Loving Difference and the programme we host there are for everyone, whatever your neuro-identity. What we all have in common is wanting new ways to thrive in our neurodiverse relationships with our partners and our children. And you can find out more at lovingdifference.net. In this podcast, we're busting the myths that neurodiverse relationships, about the myths we had when we started the journey, that we've realised now aren't true and that were preventing us from recovering and having the relationships with our partners and our children that we wanted. So we want to dispel these myths and bring you hope that absolutely things can change. So in today's episode, we're responding to a recent BBC News article in the UK about the alarming numbers of young autistic people dying in the absence of the specialist support that they need. And in our conversation, we're busting the myth that diagnosis for our children leads to all the support you need. So whether you're out and about or comfy with a cuppa, let's dive into our next and very important conversation.
And just before we start, we want you to be really careful, look after yourself. We're discussing some really tricky, difficult conversations, and we're talking about our children, and we're talking about suicide, and we're talking about our children are really struggling at the moment and not having the right support. So if you feel that that's too much for you, that's fine. Just please leave it for now. It's most important that you look after yourself. So should we just jump in? Should we go for it?
Yeah,
it was to get started, because this is tricky stuff, isn't it? Really tricky, and we both have quite personal experience of this, and also we are really honouring, aren't we, of some kind of areas around privacy for our children. So we really want to share some of our experiences from how it was for us as parents, without kind of divulging too much about what our children's experience actually was. So
yes,
do we want to just kind of make a start a little bit about this kind of idea that if we can get a diagnosis, we're going to get the support? I mean, what was our first kind of comment? What would our first kind of like response to that be, do you think?
Yeah, well, I was wondering, maybe it would be helpful for anyone who hasn't listened or hasn't been able to read the article to just mention why we're talking about it, which is that the article particularly referred to two cases, and obviously there are more, of children who sadly have ended their life, or their life has ended. There's different reasons for that happening, but in the absence of the support that they really, really needed, and that was highlighted, that their deaths were preventable had they received the support that they needed for their mental and emotional health and for their needs as an autistic person. And I think this just really hit home to me when I read it last week, that this described where either of us could have found ourselves had we not found different ways or taken different decisions or happened to have a slightly different trajectory for us, and that both of us have navigated some really, really challenging circumstances with our young people, both at primary age and into their teens, and it's just still really devastating to hear that families are moving towards diagnosis, mainly because that's the path that certainly schools, and you know this better than I, but certainly that's the route that we're recommended to take, or even obligated to take, in order that our children's needs would apparently be met either at school or in other situations and circumstances. And an awful lot of effort goes into that. And then when we have that, as this article demonstrated, the support that was promised or is recommended or is needed is simply unavailable, not accessible, not enough, not sufficient, not long enough, lots of different reasons. And it's leading to the worst of endings for many families. And yeah, so I think it felt really important for us to perhaps share a little of our own experience with some of the darkest, I guess for me, I'd just say the darkest moments and very prolonged periods in my parenting experience that I hadn't expected to be navigating and didn't really have ways to do it. So you do,
and that's really key, isn't it? It's just not what you expect when you go into parenting, to be in these situations. And I mean, I have a distinct memory of kind of thinking, okay, so when autism was first proposed, you know, by the psychiatrist that we were seeing at the time when we were in difficult situation, it was like, oh goodness, that's the answer. That's okay. I just have to get all this process done, and then we're going to get access all this, you know, support. I don't know what I expected, but I really did expect that there would be something at the end of this tunnel. And what was
even in the pre-assessment, even in the pre-diagnosis journey, I recall promises, or when you've got to this 2 years later or whatever, here is 2+ years now, but it was kind of set up like that in the pre-assessment process, when you're on a list waiting, that this is what would you can't
trigger some other things happening
like that. You can't access anything until you have this. So the assumption is made that there is something for you,
something to access.
You wait, and you do all of the things and all of the hoops to jump through and all of the forms and all of the things and all the stuff you're telling me, because there's this door I'm going to go through, and then there's going to be all of these things and all of this understanding and all of this extra help, and all of these needs will be met for my child. And we had some different experiences, didn't we? So
absolutely. And we should caveat this, shouldn't we? It's obviously our experiences in the UK, and our and your experience even within the UK may differ, because of course our health and our social care and our education are local authority based. So it's not even a UK-wide policy. So whilst you may relate to some of the things we're saying, you may also feel that your experience has been slightly different. So we can only talk to ours. And I certainly, the doorway that I walked through was the mental health doorway. So we were involved with mental health services as a first step. And I think what was probably a shocking experience for people who walk through that door is that often they've been trying the traditional things, the CBT, maybe they've gone on to medication in our case, and then it's kind of like, well, nothing's working. Oh, I think it might be this. And you go, okay, so you really grasp onto that. So you think, okay, oh yeah, I get that. And then you start reading, don't you? And I've already kind of like been already reading and researching all the mental health particular issue we were dealing with at the time, and tried to learn how to be an expert on that because no one else was seeming to fix it. So I'd already kind of geared up on all of that. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to gear myself up on all of this now. And then there was a huge amount of paperwork, and which you mentioned, and certainly in our local authority now, that's become even more upfront. So they are making sure you don't get onto the waiting list without all the paperwork completed. So even before that stage, you're looking at, several questions, 3 questionnaires, one for parents, carers, one for the young person, one for the school. If your child doesn't go to school, you're already got an issue. So that's one thing. If you've made a different decision around schooling, you've already got a problem, because that's important, that bit of paper. And then there's a long medical history form, and then there's a referral form into our single point of access. So there's 5 quite lengthy pieces of information, and then plus all the information that they're also asking for schools, and they're asking for extra bits and pieces. So it's a big chunk of work. And I know, looking back now, that I had to do that mostly when I had sleeping children. So I was doing a lot of this paperwork at night on my own, unsupported, not really knowing what it was that, would open the magic, worrying about whether I was writing the right thing. Is this the right phrase to open the lock? Is this what I need to say? And many kind of like, my own family history and all of that the medical form, very, very detailed about, my family, my husband's family, how the birth was of my child, what when he put his sentences together, when the words, loads and loads of detail that, you were trying to struggle to remember. And by that point, I was looking after 4, and it was all getting a bit of a blur,
And all with this hope.
Massive hope.
Kind of more than hope. I don't think it's even hope.
No, it's not even hope. This was going to be the answer. It's
a promise. There is it is sort of late, and I guess the thing is they do have obligations. So there is obligations on authorities, etc., from other more senior levels to provide certain things. So I think it was a promise that when you've done these things, this will be available, and then it isn't.
So that was exactly my experience, and I have very, very clear memories of driving in. I needed to go in and collect the report. You don't get this now, it's just emailed through, and they don't even bother with this bit, but at the time you did go in and have a conversation about what it meant and everything, and I got this really lengthy piece of report which actually was riddled with mistakes and so many copy and paste errors, it was bits that weren't really actually my child at all, so really disappointing from that point of view. And literally the support that I had been looking for was a list of websites to go to. I waited 2 years, and actually not 2 years, because we'd already been in the system before then. So we were 3 years into a very difficult mental health journey, and I was referred to some websites. In fact, the ironic thing was that by that point I was running the local parent support group, so I was actually referred to myself.
Heather, that's outrageous, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah. So and I'm guessing the parent support group you had, was it something you could go to if you didn't have did you have to have a diagnosis to be able to access the parent support group?
I think initially you did. So initially it was run by our
That's the
our
thing, it is the
county, so a
key
child and
being in some of these
adolescent
groups, isn't
mental
it?
health group. So it was run by CAMS. So I think, yes, initially people did have a diagnosis, but at the time at a charity that I was working for, we took that on and we changed the criteria, because in recognition of the fact that people were waiting for ages, and actually that was exactly the time you needed the support, while you were waiting for something, because we needed to actually start giving parents strategies and insights now, because we knew very well that there was nothing coming.
Yeah, and I think the reality for us was not dissimilar. I mean, certainly I was around this loop a couple of times, and I guess the second time around I guess I knew that there wasn't really anything on the other side, so I was very resistant to doing all the paperwork, and then I did do it in order that again, the school were very clear that they would only do some things that would support one of my children if there was actually that was the case of both of them, that they would make no further changes unless there was a piece of paper. But actually, once we had the piece of paper, those changes didn't really get made, and not consistently. And the reality, I think, for us then was that we were navigating mental emotional health in its worst state, without anyone, with people knowing. Like, this is the thing, I think, is that even if you and I guess this is, to me, was the shock, I think, of it, is that they would only see, there would potentially, it seemed like there was some support if you were in crisis. But crisis was that your child has already attempted to take their own life. So that was crisis. And that the children that were, or the young people that were saying things like, I don't want to be here anymore, or I do think about not being here, or life's too difficult, or some of the other phrases that we might be hearing, or all kinds of things that we
Or
start
just witnessing children that weren't leaving their rooms, unable to go to
but
school.
the reality of that, if you report that, or if that is what you're asking for help with, is that that's not a crisis enough. That's a 9-month to a year wait list. So I think that, to me, was the massive shock and reality check, which is a reality check of the worst kind, but reality check that the support or the help that we are needing does not exist, and we are going to need to navigate this as a family in the knowledge that that support isn't there. So I think that's when, I guess, both of us have made some really big choices over that time, then, to not actually then not try to act, not try, to have to find other ways, and actually, you talked about earlier about keeping a foot in there, like kind of keeping a foot in the process, but actually aligning and re-establishing how we're doing life as a family, or as parents, so that we are better able to look after ourselves and the safety of our young people when the support that we are needing isn't there. And we have schools that are not supportive of the crisis that our children are in, because I was still being asked and demanded that my child be in school for a certain amount of time, when actually they were at their really not in a great place, they were in the worst place. And
I know, absolutely.
For a long time.
And I know there's going to be people listening to what you've just said, and they're going to say, but actually my child did try and it still wasn't perceived as a crisis enough. Because that is actually the reality, that even the messaging, the shocking messages that come out, is that you didn't try hard enough to warrant help. And that is just, for me, is the most shocking thing. And anyway, we shouldn't be waiting to crisis. We all know that early intervention, early prevention is the answer, but yet the system is so broken, really, that they are firefighting. So the criteria keeps going up and up and up, and leaving, families like ourselves, really holding the pieces. And it's it's high-end stressful stuff, isn't it? You know, we're carrying something that we feel that we have no expertise in, that we have no knowledge of. We don't know what's right when we're scared to make it worse. We don't know, you know, and we're thinking, you know, my heart is saying I can't make my child go to school in this state. My head is scared because we're getting all these threats around attendance and saying that, you know, I can actually quote schools telling me that anxiety is not deemed a reason for a child to not be in school. Obviously, you know, we've got plenty of teachers off with anxiety and stress, and they can be signed off, but for a child, it's not a good enough reason for not to be in school. And those kind of messages, you're just torn apart, aren't you, by and I'm going to share this, and I would love for the person that said this to me to be listening, because at one point I rang up, and I'd stopped sending my child to school by this point. He was way too ill to be managing school. And I rang up, I was crying, I was absolutely distraught. You know, we'd been promised an emergency appointment, and at that point he said, you know, asked me, am I making him go to school? And I said, no, he's in no state to go to school. He can't. It's not like he won't, he can't. And he said, well, see, you've made it worse. And then we told you to make him go to school. I've made it worse by not sending my child to school, because I was told that I'd left him alone with his thoughts too much now, and that, you know, he had too much thinking time now, and that was making it worse. And this was the person that I was trying to, you know, to see that was going to provide me support. And so at that point, I remember just feeling like the lowest of the low, and just think, oh my God, it's all my fault, you know. And you just think that's so not helpful.
No, it's reminding me, as we're talking about it, you know, it is reminding me of the amount of what's the word, authority, or I can't think of the word. You'll remind me.
Superiority, or, you know, people
the amount
deciding that they know best because they're experts,
yes,
and they've got a degree.
So the amount that we did that when we discovered university in our relationship, so that for me, that was the doorway. So it was in my relationship first. I know yours was children first, then relationship, but still children. But I think it was the amount of weight we put on the professionals knew best. And I did that with my relationship, and I had realized in that a few years before that had not been correct on a lot of levels. And there was other stuff I needed to discover about that, and I'd already learned that. And so I think I was in a better sense of self-trust on myself, that I know myself and my people better than the professionals do. And then I think as we moved into bigger struggles, particularly around anxiety in school, managing the demands of school for my family, I think I guess I started just seeing the same signs, I think, and started to realize that I need to take my own control of this situation. And the sense to which I need to have, like you always say, and we really want parents to know this, is that you really do know your children best. We know that
you are the expert. You
are the experts in your children and their needs, how those needs are met, and how to handle what best ways to handle, because we know that most parents are just scared and don't know what best parenting techniques or parenting to use. And that is where we then start really struggling, because our own stress and our own exhaustion is kicking in, and now we don't trust. So all of that, I think I had learned to trust myself better, and I think I lent into that more, probably also being around you, I think, as well. Like that really helped me to kind of find some, I mean, I've been like, comply, do as you're told, stick to the rules, do what they say.
Absolutely.
The professionals know best, the systems know best. I've been doing that my whole life, and had started to realize that that is not right for me, and it's not right for my family. And actually, no matter what they're saying, we are going to need to do some different things than you are demanding of my children and of our family, in order that we don't become one of these statistics, arguably. So absolutely. That my child isn't one of these statistics, we are going to have to take some much more drastic action, which you're not going to agree with. And I think those were big things to do. It helped that we were together and other friends of ours traveling some of these things together with a lot of the same issues, to be able to have that level of support and just cheering each other on a bit. I mean, that's not probably doesn't seem quite the right word, but it was, I think, in those most dark situations and times, because we did understand each other's situations, and we're able to be that kind of support, I think, in terms of us making very different choices, certainly in relation to school and healthcare systems, and what we were choosing to access rather than what we were told we should be doing. So that which did mean it didn't look like what they said it should.
No, and I think
being okay with some things that I really didn't ever think I would be okay with as a parent, I think. So I don't know whether it's helpful to describe some of those things, but certainly, just I
think one of the most, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because I get in a situation where I kind of think every parent has to find their own way with it to a certain extent. So I think nobody can really tell another parent how they should do it. And everyone's situation, I've been a family support worker for a long time, and I've got parents who desperately don't want to send their children to school. They desperately want to just stay home and nourish and look after them. And they don't have flexible jobs. I was very lucky that I had a job where I could sit in a car outside my child's room in an alternative provision for very many years. I was able to dual that, meet his needs for safety and co-regulation and earn a living. That's not everybody. Not everyone can do that. It depends on their work, doesn't it? Their line of work. And also I've advocated for families whose children were diagnosed much, much younger, and did need a specialist level of support in education settings, but only to be told that really, in our area at least, and that might not be the same everywhere, but that there is a mentality that all children can manage reception in a mainstream classroom because it's just play-based. And actually, so they don't even really have specialist placements for under 7-year-olds. So that's really tricky. And we've got a whole another layer. So that's the kind of education side of it. Trying to get an education healthcare plan is really, it's getting more and more challenging. It feels like, you almost feel like you're needing lawyers now to get these things.
Well, they don't want to give them out, really. That's the fact.
They don't want to give them out because they're short of money. Everyone's short of money. So the health, you've got you've got the typical triad, haven't you? And it's difficult to get access for social care. And all of these things, of course, you have to have the diagnosis first. They say you don't. A lot of them say it's needs-based. It's not diagnosis-based. But the reality is, without a piece of paper from a professional that says that you've got these needs, which actually is the piece of paper, it's so tricky and so challenging for families, and they are left feeling very, very isolated and alone. And
I'm not sure that, and for us, for sure, that the diagnoses helped. I mean, they gave us some information, but in terms of what that secured or changed in anything else was really virtually nothing.
No, I think for me there was an element
really hopeless and depressing for a lot of people, but I think that is, and I know that isn't the case for every single person. I know that for sure. But I think there is a balance to be found between the lengths we're going to, or certainly the energy we're expending and the time we're putting in. I think partly because of how long these things take, that I think we just I have to be all in because it's going to take forever. That then our own mental and emotional health, certainly I was at the point I had to really look after my own mental and emotional health, so that as a parent, as really the only safe person for my family, the only safe person, this is, I think, was the biggest reality check for me, was the only person in the world that my child is safe with is me. And so absolutely. How do I make sure that
you're okay?
I continue that. I mean, and for a while, actually, our home wasn't a safe place because we were navigating and handling other issues in our relationship, me and Pete, and with other members of the family. So
and just so much reactivity going on. It's just very challenging. That's one of the things, isn't it? And I think often parents feel that there isn't really anything they can do, or they don't know what to do. And it seems really basic, but being able to create that safety, being able to feel confident in tackling tricky issues, isn't it? Because one of the things I thought it might be useful to share is that in my experience, in my household, things like I wish I was dead, I want to die, I would like to jump off a cliff, and these are just awful things. When your 10-year-old or 11-year-old is saying that, you just, it's breaking your heart. But one thing I have learned also is that didn't necessarily mean that there was a plan of action or a desire to end your life. It was really much more of I'm really struggling. I hate this. I want it all to stop. I want it to be better. And so I'm not trying to diminish what it's like to listen to your child to that. But I think also, I know I panicked massively, absolutely went into panic mode. And it was like, oh, I got to, so I think there's some conversations around, understanding a safety plan, understanding the difference between some of those kind of expressions of real despair, which we don't want to hear,
what those mean,
and actually whether they're having some real intent, there's plans, or whether you start having to really battling down the house. And I mean, what you can do in those situations. And I know absolutely the best thing I could do for my family was to be okay myself, and to be able to stay calm, to not be reactive, to not overreact to things, to not spend every single second on the computer, like redoing the forms, writing emails to someone, because you can get into a real, I know I did, at 2 o'clock in the morning, long emails to the school, long emails to the healthcare, please help, all of this. And actually I'd have been better off sleeping or giving some space.
You're trying to deal with everything that's gone in the past, which is all horrendous, and you're all exhausted in a horrendous situation.
Yeah.
With all the emails and the actual day-to-day of what happened today and this week and what's happening next week and what's the next thing we've got to try and do. And then we've also got, I'm trying to improve the future. I'm trying to get this into a better situation. So we're trying to be in all of this all at the same time. And it's too much for one person in the home that's primarily doing this, possibly for two people that are involved in this, it really is very exhausting, totally exhausting. I know for us,
and it's exhausting for us, and very, very quickly it's also very catching. So, the more exhausted you get, the more difficulty you have trying to help the child that's really struggling regulate, the more the other siblings. So we've got this, we ended up with 6 nervous system and a dog, so 7 nervous system, all completely dysregulated. And so it felt like it just, and at one point I had all my children under cams.
I think
I didn't get any help, but we were all and then you feel like such a failure as a parent. And I know if I could have done all of that again, I'd have made some of the things that we eventually did, I'd have done it much sooner, much quicker. I would have done some different things, but it's tough. You have to, you need
the things that made the difference for me were, one, learning to look after myself in it and balance those things. Certainly what we also talk about our relationship with okayness, and how do I be okay when my child is not okay, and how do I handle that situation. Massive. How do I realized I needed to be the safe person and the safe home as best as I could create it for my young people. That was kind of a mission. So it was less about what was going on. I realized there's very little I can do to control what they're in out there, but I can do more to control how it feels and how it is here and with me. And I think that became really important. And then I think as you were saying, getting to know what their language means, as opposed to what other people might be saying their language means. So certainly for us, and it's different for every person in my home, I have experienced all my people in my house reaching the point where they don't feel like they could continue life in varying words and degrees, and all of those experiences and language are different, and what they mean also has been different. So it's been, and only if I'm steady, only if I'm some level of okay, rather than, as you said, reactive and panicked and catastrophizing.
Yeah, you need to be staying curious and open, don't you?
Hold that, like, that's like,
yeah,
I never imagined as a parent that I would hold space for that for my children. And I had no tools to do that. I did gain some tools from some of the interventions that we were involved in, to some level, which was helpful. It certainly gave me some confidence around just having some words for that. But certainly understanding that a sentence, certainly one of my children would use just to say, yeah, I can't even remember the phrase they said now, but the phrase that they would be using that would have indicated to me in an earlier time, oh my goodness, I might wake up and they're not here. They might have done something to themselves, literally. I started to understand from them, because the next day they would go to bed, and then the next day they would be fine, or some level of fine. They actually would be fine. And so I did start talking to them, and they were able to say, I just can't, it just means I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I can't
do it anymore, which is not that I can't do life anymore. It's just everything's too hard. Everything's got too hard. But I've had some food and I've gone to sleep, and so now I can go again. So there's something to do with that. It was important for me to understand that when I hear you say that, what it means for you is not necessarily what it means to me, what you saying that is. So that's a helpful distinction. Again, we always talk about different experiences, and my experience of those words, if I was saying them, and your experience of saying them to me, is a different thing. And then for my husband, the same. It was him saying, I'm at my limit. I can't do this anymore, or I don't know how I'll cope if that happens, or if something else in life's happening. So that's something we can handle. And then I think the other things were to be more confident around the questions that we can ask. And there's two that get us the clarity we need to be in the right, nervous system and okayness for ourselves, and get some of the help we can get, which would be to ask, are you having suicidal thoughts? So this is a question that we could get more comfortable. We could ask each other when we're not even in that situation, just to get more comfortable with these words and language, because they feel so they can feel so extreme and so shocking to even use and say these words. They became much more familiar language to me, which would be the last thing I'd want to have. But that meant that I was in a steadiness for my children in a different way. So to be able to ask someone that, and then to be able to ask, if the answer to that question is no, then we know we're in a certain position. And if the answer is yes, we can ask, and have you made a plan? And that tells us another level of information. And even that doesn't mean that there is an intention to go ahead with that plan. So these are, there's many steps to these things potentially happening. And I think these are helpful questions as parents that we never would imagine that we need to know, but knowing them and having some strategies around them and the support around them, if you're in this situation or in this right now, can be really helpful to be around some people who know, and who know what it is to hold that space for our children who are struggling before kind of their lives even started, arguably, and to potentially be feeling so hopeless in it, I think is really, really important. And then just to make, certainly I decided that mental and emotional health and well-being is the number one.
Top of the list.
Top of the list for me, and the top of the list for them, and everything else goes below that. So every school demand was below that priority, because it became evident to me,
and every social demand.
It was not the priority for anybody else in relation to my child, not even the systems that promise some services. It's not their priority. So it needed to be my priority in every other decision that I was making for them and for myself. And that was really helpful.
And I think it's not just about education, is it? It's not just about the educational demands. It's about you know, I know from our household, you know, we had a lot of sensory demands.
Yeah,
And
social
a
demands.
lot of that was, and social demands, and a lot of that was around culture and society and our belief systems, and actually having the energy and the capacity to start challenging some of those and thinking, what's more important? You know, I will still sit in meetings and have family, you know, and having professionals telling families that I'm supporting that, you know, perhaps everything would be better if they all sat around the table and ate. And I'm like, oh,
even the demands inside of your home and how you're navigate or how you're doing life together, there may be some really, they are quite simple changes to make that we did, that when you put some other things at the top of the list and people's specific and individual needs at the top of the list, that actually some of the other things around safety and capacity can be addressed.
And choice, giving some more choice and control back to our young people. And, you know, that's been for my family and for my young people, you know, putting them back in the driving seat and, you know, not to make it, so, you know, it's individual, isn't it? But certainly for mine, you know, it's listening to the no as well. I think that's really important. I think, you know, I had a conversation with one of my young people, you know, very, very good and interesting conversation, you know, about understanding some of the really challenging and difficult behavior we had. And he said, well, I had no choice because, you know, adults, you don't listen, you keep trying to persuade. You know, we do, don't we? Think, oh, it's like, you know, when they're, you know, younger, perhaps it's a birthday party and they say, no, I'm not going. And you go, oh, I'm sure you'll have fun. Let's just go for a little bit. You keep going, don't you? And this happens in many, many levels. And as they get older, we still have this tendency to do that. And so I was like, oh, okay, so I really have to listen to a no.
Yes.
You know, and as a parent, we're not really used to listening to a no from our child, are we? You know,
well, again, that's more steadiness again, isn't it? It's steadiness and changing our role or our perception of ourselves as parents, I think, as well. I've just had to question
changing a perception of the power dynamics, I think.
Yes.
I don't think, like, you know, many parents necessarily would think about themselves as power crazed or something, but actually you do. We know we've all grown up, you know, subconsciously sort of thinking that we make the rules and our children are supposed to follow the rules somehow. And actually, you know, getting much more curious about why our children were behaving why they were where they were, rather than actually trying to change it or adapt. You know, there's just so many things that we can do. And I guess that's the empowering thing that we want maybe our listeners to understand, is that we can feel very hopeless, helpless, disempowered, waiting on these waiting lists for the experts who are going to fix everything.
Or even beyond it,
there are
the diagnosis.
More things. There are more things that we can do. And sometimes they're scary. So we understand totally that, you know, you need support. And sometimes the big things like, you know, you find out, you know, things get in the way of that, but there are usually some small things that can happen that make things better. And some of our, you know, resources, don't they? We're really talking around some of this, don't we? And I really like to empower parents to kind of pace themselves, to really, like, you know, like you said earlier about keep your foot in the system, keep your foot in the door, so that, you know, if you need to open it, or if it does get opened a bit wider, you can wedge it open a bit. You know, I'm not saying don't go down that line, anything like that, but actually to not get stuck in the kind of like, while we're waiting, I'm just waiting and I can't do anything, and this is all going horribly wrong, and we're in total crisis, and the family is falling apart. Because we do have some tools. I think, you know, our program in Love and Difference, you know, that they are the tools that we use, aren't they, in order to help us keep steady, to give ourselves some more trust, and to really have a different view around our roles in relationship and relationship mode, whether it's with our partners or whether it's with our children. And I, you know, I don't want to trivialize or minimize anything that anyone's going through. And I also want to really encourage people to just look after themselves, really, really look after themselves, and to look and get curious about what it is their child might be needing that we could help them with or support them with, because there will be some ways.
Yes, there definitely are some ways. So with all that in mind, the truth that we've realised then is that the support that we're often all expecting to be there, hoping to be there, isn't there. And we can lose ourselves in the battle for it, and we can be extremely disappointed when we get there and the support that we've assumed, expected, hoped for isn't there. Yeah. Do you want to close us out, Heather? Because this is
I do,
certainly
and
just your thing.
it's just to really reiterate that well, I think there are very many amazing parents, and I've worked with so many now, and without fail, every single one of them is a totally amazing parent feeling like a failure. And they are the ones that are questioning themselves. They are the ones that are trying absolutely everything. But very often, too much effort is being put into pushing the kind of like the ball uphill and trying to get the systems to do their thing. And it is totally exhausting. And then what I see is like a complete burnout occurring because we're trying to juggle too many things. So it's ticking some of those over. You know, if this speaking to you, if you're writing very long emails at 2 o'clock in the morning, like I was, if you're kind of spending hours and hours, you know, rewording education healthcare plans or picking up every detail that might be wrong in some document, you know, that those are precious time. You will not get that back. And actually your child needs you now, not when you finish the forms. I mean, that was very much, oh, I can just get this done once I've got this off my plate. But there was always another form. There was always another review. You know, you do one of those things and you've got to do it again in about 2 months' time. And it's endless. So pace, massive something about pace. Remember that, you know, you're probably your greatest gifts that you can give your children is your own regulation and your own presence. And I do resent that time that I spent being warrior send mom. It gave me a lot of purpose. I felt like I was doing a lot, but I wasn't actually getting anywhere, and I wasn't making that much progress. And I think people can end up feeling very disappointed and very let down. And it just takes the eye off the ball of what we could be doing now. So
I wanted to just add, that came to mind was that when our children are and young people, I mean, we're still navigating some of this with our young adults, aren't we? And I think the thing that I also wanted to say was that if you've done all that and you've been burnt out and you're on the other side of all the forms and everything, into adulthood doesn't necessarily, it's not all done then either when they have to move into having help post 18. It's not like there's suddenly some wondrous availability of something then either. So I think what I realize is that we are in, both of us talk about really that our children are recovering from childhood, like they are needing to recover from many years of mental and emotional health challenges and being in unsafe environments and being with adults that they can't trust and lots of things that need recovery, and that takes a lot of time.
So much time.
So we are navigating this ourselves now. We are not beyond all of it.
So
we are in it now, supporting
10,
the
11 years
recovery
on.
of our,
so 11 years on from our first crisis. That's not to say it was all rosy before that either.
No.
But we are still paying the price, really.
Yeah. But there is hope, and there is more capacity coming in for some of our young people, and there is dreams, and certainly it is a beautiful thing to find and begin to see our young people and young adults who have been really struggling at the real depths of thinking that life really is quite pointless and there is no hope, to begin to think of anything related to future and to begin to have the very smallest amounts of capacity, and that it is just like for any of us as adults, if we experience burnout or exhaustion or very, very high levels of anxiety, the same is true. And so I think I wanted to share something about that on the other side of those things, that is there, it takes time. And so again, we can't just say, well, I'm going to keep going at the pace of those form filling for 10, 15 years. That's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable, is it? So yeah, it's been so helpful for us to find a way that means we can be well and okay and hold one of the most challenging spaces, holding space for that as a parent, and have some better ways and have support. Thank you, Heather, for being one of those people.
And to please, to not, I'm not saying not to listen to professionals, because obviously there are some amazing professionals out there who really know their stuff, and there's some who actually may not know as much as you do in the room. Because I know parents, they get themselves really clued up and they get to know this stuff really inside and outside, and they know their children. And to just remember, you are the expert and you will have ways that you can support your young person.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if any of this has resonated with you today, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching, get notifications of future episodes. It's been a big and tough topic to be speaking to today. I know at times I've been trying to make sure I'm saying what I want to say and protect other people's stories and stuff. So I hope that we've done that in a kind and compassionate way. Obviously, our thoughts are also with everyone who has featured it in the article and the devastation and despair that they have experienced and the lack of support. So it's really big stuff. So thank you for listening and sticking with us today.
If this episode has resonated with you, subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening or watching to get notifications of future episodes. To dive deeper into all of this with professional coaching, resources, and all the support you need, join us in Love Indifference via www.loveindifference.net. And we'll be back here soon.